All right. Well, welcome to the Private Practice Elevation Podcast. Christy Pearl, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Daniel.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for connecting and reaching out. I'm excited to learn about your expertise and really dive into this topic. But before we do that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us a little bit about your story, how you got to do what you're doing currently.
Sure. I am an EMDR therapist and consultant, and I'm here in right outside Richmond, Virginia, and I also practice in Massachusetts. I'm in private practice. I've been in private practice for about 5 years as solo. I was in a group prior to that, but I think that in a lot of ways, I'm kind of like a case example myself of my own area of expertise. And I think probably a lot of people listening can relate to that. We tend to be able to help others the most with things that we have our own experience
Mm,
with.
right.
I think my journey to becoming a therapist very much exemplifies what we're going to be talking about today, which is how our um, old family roles or old, unresolved emotional patterns that we learn early in life, all those adaptations we make to our early experiences, how those things really influence the way we make decisions later on in life, how we show
Yeah.
up in our careers, which is what I specialize in. I help adult children of alcoholics, and really, it's probably more appropriate to say I help adult children of emotionally immature parents.
Mm,
I'm a big fan of Lindsay Gibson's work. If you're not familiar with her books, she's fantastic. She wrote a book called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents.
mm,
She's written a number of books, but I refer my clients to them a lot because I think, when we talk about adult children of alcoholics, that's sort of a subset of a larger, broader umbrella, which most of us are members of. Most of us are standing under the umbrella of, we didn't get perfect parenting, and we don't
right.
necessarily need to have gotten perfect parenting, but most of us got some kind of insecure attachment wound from childhood.
Yeah.
We had things that happened to us, and maybe sometimes, like I will explain to my clients, it's, there are painful things that happen, the kind of quote unquote bad things that happen to us, and then there are the good things that didn't happen to us enough.
Mm,
And most of
right.
us have some experience with one or both of those. So
Yeah.
when I say, I work with adult children of alcoholics, and that is kind of a niche for me, it's a specialty for me. I certainly work with people who maybe their parents didn't drink, but had some other way of really not being able to show up for you the way you needed, and you experienced some level of emotional abandonment or
Yeah.
shame or chaos in your early family experience. So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying that's what I experienced, and I'm on the spectrum of therapist disclosure in public. I'm kind of on the end of, I do share some of that personal experience in public, but I think that also gives me that understanding of what that's like and how it does impact things in adult life when we repeat
Yeah.
those patterns. And I certainly did that myself. I came to therapy as a second career, even though I had thought about it for years, but I did
Hmm.
what a lot of people do, which is I first chose a career that maybe would make people in my family happy, but wasn't really what made me happy. And
Yeah.
then, you know, I play I so I had a role in my early family, sort of a blend of that lost child, but also a little bit of the golden child. So I
Mm,
tended to excel in school because that was the one place in my life that I could feel good. So I really excelled in school, but I was emotionally more of a lost child. And I very much repeated that role in my career journey of kind of wandering around, wafting around, like not really making active choices or kind of having that sense of self that I knew who I was and what I wanted, or even
Yeah.
believed that I could want things. And that if I actually let myself want something, that I could actually get it. That was a
Mm.
real growth curve for me. So eventually, through a lot of help and a lot of healing, got to, where I am today, which I feel, I'm in a very different place now than I was back in my young adult life, and I'm
Yeah.
really, really grateful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Well, I think what you're doing is it's so needed. I mean, obviously, I believe in mental health therapy. My wife is a therapist, but I mean, as I get older myself, like these kind of what you're talking about just comes up so much more and more as I'm learning. And I'm actually currently in this I don't know what to call it. It's like part coaching, part group coaching, part group therapy, part one-on-one coaching that I'm doing right now. That's this leadership thing through my church actually. And we
Mhm.
were getting into this stuff, and like we're hearing each other's stories, everyone's sharing their stories. And yes,
Mhm.
some people had some terrible experiences growing up. Other people had really good experiences with their family, but
Uh-huh.
good or bad or however we label it. And you kind of alluded to something earlier, what you said. That's kind of why I'm mentioning this. There's always that room for like you said, those attachment wounds, those things that come up, those ways that we learn as children to cope, or the roles that we play in our family. And so like I'm on kind of that personal journey myself of kind of uncovering what are those roles. And I'm
Mhm.
seeing ways that I'm responding to my own children that are not the ways that
Mhm.
I necessarily want to respond to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so finding those things is like, oh wow, like that started way back here. Like, oh
Yeah.
man, like what do we do with that?
Yeah. What do
So
we do
it's
with that? That's the
so
$1 million question.
yeah,
What do we do with that? And I see that a lot with my clients, who start realizing they're not quite showing up the way that they would like to with
yeah,
their own kids. And there can be a lot of guilt and a lot of shame around that. And, what I say when I'm working with my clients is, you know, the fact that you are noticing that, the fact that you're even asking yourself these questions really shows your own capacity for healing and for nurturing not
yeah,
just your kids but yourself. And
right,
so I say, we will get to that. We'll get to how this impacted your kids and your own parenting, which it does. I mean, it just does. This is just how it works.
yeah,
But the best thing you can do for your kids is what you're sitting here with me doing right now for yourself. And in my experience, most people, at least most adult children that I work with, have an easier time accessing that inner loving place within themselves for their kids or for other people. And it's a matter of learning
mhm,
how to turn some of that compassion and grace towards yourself,
yeah,
because that's what, not you, but
right,
the global you, like that's what we maybe didn't get from our own parents. And it's not just about what happened back then or even what didn't happen. It's what happened next.
mm,
So we are incredibly resilient and children are incredibly resilient. It's We can go through really tough things in this life, and nobody gets through this life without difficulty.
yeah,
That's the human condition.
mhm,
Nobody gets off this ride without some bumps,
yeah,
here or there. And we can be incredibly resilient as kids, um, if we have the support and nurturing and that competent, nurturing, holding environment that the adults around us are hopefully capable of providing. So what I say to clients is, you've given your kids mostly really nurturing parenting. So they can, or like most good enough, like that's the good, it's the good enough parenting model. you've
Hmm.
you've provided, your kids know you love them, they know you're glad they're there, that you've got them, you've got it, so they can handle it the day you lose it, you
Right.
know they can handle those moments when you don't, it's like those like bad parent days. They can handle that because most of the time they've gotten what they needed from you, and there's something called repair.
Hmm.
You can go back to them and say, you know what, I'm sorry, i I shouldn't have said it that way.
Right.
Mommy's sorry that she yelled.
Hmm.
And that is something that most adult children did not get in their own childhood.
Yeah.
They did not get the repair. So they got the hard things, they got the painful experiences, but then they didn't get the emotionally mature parenting response to that, which is the repair part. And
Right.
that blows people's minds sometimes when I say that. They say, I didn't even know that was a thing. I
Mm.
never had anybody
Yeah.
do that with me.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, well, now you know. And so it's really about there's something in the adult child world that we talk about a lot, which is reparenting. And it's really learning how to be that loving parent to yourself that you never got or didn't get
Yeah.
enough of.
Yeah.
And that loving parent inside of you um, can use gentleness and humor and curiosity, and it's like your own inner Mr. Rogers. Like that's why we all loved him so much, because he embodied these loving parent qualities
Yeah.
that resonated with us so much. And those of us that weren't getting that in our own home got it on TV with him.
Hmm. Yeah, it's true. Well, I want to kind of shift gears a little bit. We kind of went deep into parenting there, which is great, but I want to also shift gears into like the professional world. You know, so
Yeah.
we have mostly private practice owners,
Oh,
therapists,
yes.
chiropractors. All those private practice owners listening, and I know from experience as a business owner that a lot of this stuff certainly shows up. These emotional patterns that we carry, from childhood.
Mhm.
And honestly, like owning a business has been one of the most challenging in a good way, like growth periods of my life, because it brings things up. Like you're dealing with clients, you're dealing with so many different people, you're navigating money issues, and how do you respond to money? Business is slow, business is not slow, like there's all these different responses that come up. um why don't we just kind of get into that? Tell us a little bit about how do we kind of manage these emotional patterns that show up, that we're kind of like, oh, this is bringing up some stuff here that I don't,
Yeah.
that's not comfortable.
Yeah, well, you know what? I know from personal experience and from friends and colleagues of mine that there's nothing like running a business that will show you your stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we're left to our own devices, right? We don't even
Yeah.
have the container and the structure of a workplace and a
Yeah.
boss.
Yeah.
So we're completely on our own, left to our own to create it and to kind of decide what it looks like and to respond. And so yeah, I want to say first of all that many people are surprised that the same issues we were just talking about that might affect your parenting or even your personal relationships in general also impact your work. And I think there's a really good reason for that, which is we might have adapted early on in our early life by really learning how to compartmentalize. Like I mentioned earlier, I excelled in school because like school was the one place I could go that felt safe and
Hmm.
where I could do well. The
Yeah.
rest of what was happening in life didn't feel so good.
Hmm.
So school became like a really good place for me
Yeah.
and and I think it does for many of us, at least those of us who adapt with overachieving, which is
Hmm.
probably, many of your listeners. School becomes a great place for us, and we think it's normal to kind of try to compartmentalize and shut down some stuff when we go away from home every day, because
Yeah.
that's a survival skill in and of itself, to be able to keep going on with normal life despite what's happening at home.
Yeah.
So that's one of the first skills we learn how to do, is because we've got to keep going. If I stay connected and, really impacted by what's happening at home, then, if I'm an adult child, then I can't function. So
Yeah.
I get really good at kind of compartmentalizing, putting that over there, and going to school. And in my mind, I think, okay, these two places are separate, because they kind of are early
Hmm.
on,
Yeah.
except then they're not.
Right.
So we grow up and we continue functioning like that in our work. And whether you leave the house or not to go to your job at this point, we bring it all to work with us.
Right.
And so I think, I wanted to say that because a lot of people are truly surprised by that. They don't realize
Yeah.
that, you mean the same stuff I'm having a hard time with, like, that's going on at work too. Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Um, so, I mean, I think that it can impact us in a lot of ways. Our early adaptations to our early trauma can impact how we make decisions about our careers. It can impact our ability to respond once we, do make those decisions, or once we do have the practice. We can notice ourselves getting hijacked sometimes from those reactivity places in us, as opposed to being able to stay really grounded and present and
Yeah.
respond from that adult self that we want to be able to have. We can find ourselves reacting as opposed to responding in, a number of ways. You mentioned a bunch of them just now, whether it's, how we are handling money, how this is where boundaries really come in. A lot of us struggle with boundaries. It's one of the most common, issues that comes up for
Yeah.
people. How we handle our time, how we handle our fees, whether or not we charge the no-show fee, all
Hmm.
of these things, how we feel even with certain clients. There's so many ways that this can show up.
Yeah. Yeah. And it feels like a lot, I'll be honest.
Uh-huh.
Like you said, I think that it is. And I love how you laid that out about that compartmentalizing like that. I mean, it's so true. And I work from home, every day. Like my office is right next door to the living room, so there's those days where it's like you're just trying to get the kids off to school and they're fighting with us. And our 6-year old, he has big emotions, and so it could be this whirlwind. And then it's like, okay, I'm supposed to just go one room over now and be the CEO of this company and
Yeah,
make big decisions and that sort of thing. And so
yeah,
that totally resonates with me, like how you can't compartmentalize it because it's all part of the human experience. And
right.
my identity as a father, I want to bring into my identity as
Yeah.
a business owner, and so I think that I'd love to kind of touch on a little bit. You've been kind of touching on this as we've been talking about, like, kind of how we move past this. And it seems
Yeah.
like step number one, it sounds like, is that being aware, like we're being aware of kind of like what's going
Mhm.
inside of us. And I loved what you said, kind of the next thing about parenting yourself, like giving
Mhm.
yourself that grace and that safe
Mhm.
place. And I think that can be, truly challenging too, to that negative self-talk that sometimes we go into, or
Yeah.
shame and kind of condemning ourselves and that sort of stuff. Are there other things that we can do to kind of help help us kind of move past these things and feel, not feel, but show up how we want to show
Yeah.
up in this world.
Well, I think it is feel. I think it very much is feel because, as an EMDR therapist, I can't help but bring, the body into this, because,
Hmm.
we have our thoughts, and our thinking brain isn't the only way we know things. It's not our only source of wisdom. So
Yeah.
we have our thinking brain, we have our emotions, and we have our body. And these are all parts of how we know things and move in the world, and how we connect with other people. So, like you said, when you're in the living room trying to get your kids off for school, and you've got to have a really grounded system, because whatever gets activated in your body mind, then when you walk into the next room to sit down and be the CEO, your body is in that room with you.
Right. Yep.
So I think that, number one, whatever way makes sense, there's a lot of ways to heal, but I think what we're really talking about is the importance of doing your own work.
Hmm.
And, I'm very much a wounded healer, physician heal thyself. What I sometimes will say to therapists that I'm working with, whether they're clients or whether they're consultees, is your mission cannot outperform your mindset. And
Hmm.
what I mean by that is that old saying of, you can't take someone else where you don't know how to go.
Yeah.
And I've seen that in myself when I've discovered, blind spots for myself, kind of, I've done a lot of work, but there's always the dust bunnies under the couch. And I
Right.
find the
Right.
dust bunny, every now and then. And I think, oh, okay, that's why I'm kind of feeling that way, when I'm doing this type of work, or when I'm with that particular client, because there's another layer for me to do there. There's a little bit of healing that I need to get myself a little more grounded. So I think it's about doing your own work. And and someone, I heard someone say this one time, which is, again, as if this is an EMDR reference, but your nervous system is the interweave, which, for any EMDR therapist listening, an interweave is just something that you do or say to kind of help the client kind of keep moving, kind of
Mm.
take that next step in their
Yeah.
healing. And just this idea that my ability to stay grounded, and and curious, and calm, and creative, and connected, all of these qualities that we want to be able to help other people cultivate, my ability to be in that place is the the way that I can serve best. Yes, I have
Yeah.
these kind of interventions or these approaches that I use, but none of that matters if I can't show up in a grounded place. So that takes me taking care of myself.
Yeah.
I think we can do the work in whatever way makes sense for each of us. Again, we all get to decide the particular kind of menu of healing for ourselves. But for me,
Yeah.
it was therapy, it was spiritual, growth, it was reading books and listening to podcasts. I mean, you name it, I've done it. Like, acupuncture, like, I've done so many different healing modalities, and I have my favorites that help keep me, kind of running smoothly now.
Yeah.
It's really about accessing all, again, kind of going back to what we said earlier when we were, kind of on that parenting subject. It's not a tangent, because that's what we want to hopefully be able to do for ourselves,
Yeah.
because we treat ourselves how we were treated.
Mm.
So if you're an adult child that experienced a lot of criticism, a lot of um, get over it, just, you shouldn't be feeling that way, just just move on. Just what's your problem? Why can't you just do this?
Hmm.
Or don't worry about that. Just ignore it. You know, all of that stuff then becomes how we interact with ourselves.
Yeah.
What's my problem? Why can't I just do this? I shouldn't feel that way.
Right.
So all that ignoring, dismissing, minimizing, that criticizing, shaming, blaming that we do with ourselves, that is those old messages that we have taken and internalized and have now become sort of the way we interact with ourselves. And it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be that way. It does
Yeah.
not have to be that way. We can learn to cultivate more safety, emotional safety inside our own skin. And it's not, I guess, what I'd like to offer again, and I can't help it because I'm a somatically based therapist, is that it's not just a mental exercise. We've
Hmm.
got to get into the body,
Yeah.
because part of what our brain can do is conscious. And then we've got all this unconscious stuff that's hanging around in our
Right.
nervous system. And that's where we get into the self sabotage, because our thinking brain is saying, I'd like to raise my rates, and this is how, this is what I'd like to charge, and so this is when I'm gonna do it. And then our unconscious material, all of these sort of our implicit memory that's storing all of our old experience, that has been integrated into our unconscious mind, keeps getting in the way. Somehow we never
Yeah.
get around to saying it.
Yeah.
Somehow we never get around to telling our clients, or to writing the memo,
Hmm.
or to putting it on our website, or somehow we just never get to it. And
Yeah.
that's how we get in our own way. If we don't get down into that unconscious material and allow ourselves to bring that up into our conscious minds where we can deal with it, then our thinking brain and our emotional physical memory never match. They can never sync up and be on the same page.
Right.
So I feel like I just said a lot, so I'm going to stop talking.
I feel like for me, you're preaching to the choir here. I'm like, okay, I need to go find an EMDR therapist and get started on some of this work. I actually, one of my wife's best friends is an EMDR therapist, so maybe I'll
Wonderful.
might reach out
Yes.
to her, because it's very serendipitous, in my own life that we're having this conversation right now. Because, like I said, I'm learning about these different things that are kind of showing up for me, and like you said, the dust bunnies. Like I'm a learner. I'm like, I want to grow. I want to, get my mindset right. And so I constantly do that work, but it's like, oh, wow. Yeah. There's still more there. There's still more under there.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah,
Yeah.
there's probably, likely so much stuff that we don't even realize because it's not part of our conscious brain, like you said. I've done some brain spotting. My wife,
Oh,
she's trained in brain spotting.
fantastic.
So I haven't done
Yeah.
EMDR yet, but it's fascinating.
In
Just the
the same
stuff.
family.
Right, right. It's
Yeah.
just interesting the things that come up that you're not even. It's like there's pieces that get put together when you do this type of therapy that just blows my mind. Like, it's just really really cool, and you
Yeah.
learn so much, and yeah, it's just part of the growth process,
Yeah.
for
The
sure.
brain
But
is really powerful. And, I know maybe to some people listening, it sounds kind of woo woo, but it's really not woo woo. It's biological,
yeah,
when it's this is science,
right.
we when we have early life experiences that are overwhelming to us, which, parents or caregivers who are struggling, that is by definition overwhelming to a child,
Mhm.
because children need their parents or caregivers to be okay.
Yeah.
It's a survival thing. And
Mhm.
this is why those adaptations that we make starting back then are so powerful, because there's, you know, a lot of people out there talking about boundaries and setting boundaries and here's how you do it. But the implicit memory, the unconscious memory, is not going to let you do that. That's putting the cart before the horse when
Mm.
you're trying to learn the how before you've dealt with the why.
Yeah. Hmm.
Because the those early experiences that we adapt to are the roots of those issues that create those problems with boundaries later anyway. So
Right.
it can feel really hard to change because it's rooted in a survival strategy. You know, if I grow up in a home where there's a lot of chaos, guess what? I'm going to get really good at being very vigilant and overly aware of other people.
Mm.
I'm going to get really good at that as a way of adapting to a chaotic environment.
Right.
And I'm going to start noticing other people way more than I notice myself. And those adults are going to be very self-involved, most likely, if there's that much chaos. So they are not going to be noticing me very much either, or not enough.
Right.
So that over preoccupation with what's going on outside of me and under preoccupation with what's happening inside of my own reality, that's the seeds of codependence.
Mm.
Because I am too aware of what's going on outside of me and not having enough of a self on the inside and not enough awareness and safety to just stay with myself.
Yeah.
So in adulthood, that looks like codependence, where we're maybe way too worried about what those clients of ours are going to think about us if we raise our
Mm.
rates, or if we say we're not available at this time anymore. We're overly concerned with what they are going, how that's going to impact them,
Right.
and not concerned enough with what it's costing us to continue to work at times we don't want to, or charge fees that don't support the life we need.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it's some deep stuff here, Christy. I know
There is.
we could talk
I'm
all day.
sorry.
We could. No, it's wonderful. No, I really appreciate it. Yeah, we do have to wrap up, but I know we could
Yeah.
talk about this forever. Because yeah, the mind is an amazing thing, and these stories that we walk through from
Yeah.
birth to grave, it's challenging sometimes,
Yeah.
man.
Well, I guess, you know, I would like to leave like on a hopeful note, which is that
Yeah.
we're here, and the reason I show up every day is because all of the things we've talked about, they don't have to stay there, and
Right.
healing is absolutely possible. I see it every day and I've done it
Yeah.
myself. So it feels big, but I would invite anyone in your audience, and even you and me, you know, if we're feeling overwhelmed by this, to see if you can access that quality of curiosity. See
Yeah.
if you can come into or strengthen or access that quality of curiosity that we all have, and start just getting curious about, huh, does this apply to me? Or yeah, I noticed something that we talked about today, you know, really kind of piqued my interest. I'm gonna be curious about that, see what I
Yeah.
notice myself. So we can just start there with curiosity, and I would say gentleness
Yeah.
with
Hmm.
yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, there's nothing that has to be an emergency here.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Christy, for sharing your expertise and a little bit of your story. This has been just a great conversation, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to get a lot out of it. I know I have, which I think was evident in our conversation. But yeah, where can people find out a little bit more about you online?
Well, they can go to my website, christypearl.com. That's the best place to sort of see what I'm all about and maybe get a sense for, how I think about things. That's probably the best place to go. I do a little bit on social media, but not a lot. My nervous system doesn't really enjoy social media that much. So
Me neither.
I'm on there, but I really do practice some digital minimalism. So
Yeah.
my website is the best place to go.
Okay. Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, Christy.
Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.